Okay, good morning everybody. Thank you very much for taking the time out of this busy event schedule to come and join us. We're going to spend the next 45 minutes or so exploring some of the challenges that our clients share with us in the translation industry and giving you some pointers as to how you can go about avoiding these challenges. I'm David Brett, I'm the Sales Director at Language Connect. This is my colleague David Jones. He is our Legal Specialist Business Development Manager. We share the same name, so it's easy to remember or easy to forget, depending on how the session goes. But we very much share the same goal, and that is to give each and every one of you at least one thing that you can take away from this session that can help you make more informed choices about your international language partners. To help us do this, it'd be great to get a gauge of the experience that we have in the room. So who here has regular, daily, weekly translation needs? They understand the translation industry, the processes and the best practices? Anybody? Okay, great. Who here has less frequent needs, maybe quarterly needs, have a provider, but don't really know too much about the back end and the processes and the what's? Okay. And who here has no real experience but sees international practice as a growth area for them and they'd like to just to get a better understanding of the industry? And who here is just looking for a seat after being on their feet for the last couple of hours? Okay, as I say, we look to give you one thing each. If we don't, our stand is just here, first left, outside of this arena. Do please come and join us afterwards. But for now, I'm going to introduce you to David. I'm just going to briefly introduce you to Language Connect. We are a global language services provider. We're what's known as a multi-language vendor. We cover in excess of 150 languages. We have a global office network which offers 24-hour, round-the-clock support for our clients. We are members of the Association of Translation Companies and GALA. We have the ISO 9001 accreditation of our quality management systems. We were in the Sunday Times Fast Track 100 last year of the fastest 100 growing private companies, and Plimsoll actually ranked as number one in efficiency amongst 270 language service providers in the UK. So just to get across the sort of credibility to what we say. We also work with a large number of legal translation companies. Legal translation is a specialist vertical of ours, working with a number of the top 100 legal firms. So we're well versed and experienced in the legal translation industry. I'm going to introduce you to David now. David's going to talk to you about some of the challenges that our clients share with us, and then I'll be back to give you some pointers as to how you can go about avoiding these challenges. So, David Jones.
Thank you, David. You may recognize this picture of the actor Harrison Ford. Harrison Ford has a young son, and when his son was asked to speak to his preschool class and talk about what his daddy did for a living, this is what he said. He said, "My daddy is a film actor. Sometimes he plays the good guy, and sometimes he plays the lawyer." Now, we think that's harsh. That doesn't really chime with our experience of the legal profession. They may not all be Indiana Jones, but we certainly don't think of them as the bad guys. We don't like to see professional people being undervalued, but we do see it. We see it all the time. Now, I'm sure many of you will remember the changes that were made to legal aid entitlement. These changes were implemented 2 years ago. It drastically reduced the funding that was available to people seeking representation in family cases, welfare cases, and immigration cases. A lot of questions were asked 2 years ago as to whether or not this would lead to an increase in self-representation in courtrooms. The questions were asked, and we've seen some answers, because last year we saw a survey of magistrates which suggested that almost half of people who attend cases for family court are representing themselves. So, who needs lawyers? We don't just sympathize with the legal profession on this point, we empathize. Because thanks to the wonders of machine translation, Lots of people think that they can do our job themselves too. Interesting fact for you. Every day, Google translates enough text to fill 1 million books. The question is, would you want to read those books? This is a picture of a novelty coffee table. I've chosen this picture because it reminds me of a machine translation of the original car. You can see the badge, you can see the license plate, you can tell that this used to be a Ferrari, but you can't drive it. Machine translation doesn't acknowledge context, it doesn't apply grammatical rules. If you want to say hello to someone in an unfamiliar language, and you have 60 seconds to find the right word, then yes, Google Translate may have its uses. If you want to say happy birthday, you may be okay there too. If you want to say something more complicated, you need to tread very carefully. That applies to website text, it applies to product manuals, and it certainly applies to important legal evidence. And we find that every day. DIY translation doesn't work. It doesn't work any better than DIY law. It doesn't work when you rely on machines. And our clients tell us that it doesn't work when you rely on your own in-house legal staff. Every day, David and I speak to legal professionals who are fluent in more than one language. Now, we admire that. We think that's a very good skill to have. But is it the skill they should be applying? Yesterday, I spoke to a client of ours who told me that one of her associates had spent 2.5 hours proofreading a Spanish employment contract. Now, this associate is a person whose client billing rate is £250 an hour. So, at £625 for the assignment, I think that's probably the best paid proofreader in this country. Is it the best use of their time? No, it's not. Is it the best use of their employer's resources? I'd have to say no, it's not. Their employer certainly doesn't think so. Even if you leave aside those numbers, is it practical for a law firm to have translations done by in-house teams when there are such variations in languages, not only from case to case, but from region to region within different countries? Do people speak with one voice in the same country? In the first decade of the 21st century, use of Arabic online increased by 2,500%. That was by far the biggest increase of any language. But when we say Arabic, what do we mean? Do we mean Arabic people speaking with one voice? We certainly don't. There are 5 major regional forms of Arabic. Within that, there are multiple different dialects. These dialects are so varied that you can find Arabic people who are completely unintelligible to each other. When you have that kind of variety, can you really rely on an in-house translation team? Or would you rather outsource to genuine specialists who understand that when you say Arabic, you mean many, many different things? How do you protect your reputation in a multilingual society? It's a question that comes up for the legal profession. It's a question that comes up for many professions. It's a question that will come up for everyone in this room at some point in their careers. The latest census data for the UK tells us there are 49 main languages in this country. When we say main language, what we mean by that is that there are at least 15,000 speakers of that language. That data also tells us that right now in the UK, there are 1 million households who don't have a single member for whom English is their main language. Bringing that closer to home to London, right now, there are 300,000 people in the City of London who simply don't understand English. Now, how does that apply to the legal profession? How does that apply to protecting your reputation? Clinical negligence cases have never had a higher profile than they do now. Every year there are 15,000 cases in the UK alone. When those cases involve multilingual communication, the ability to translate key terminology with absolute accuracy, that can be the difference between justice and injustice, protecting your reputation and sacrificing it. Now, claims against accounting and finance professionals are also very high profile, and they're also increasing. The ability to have a financial report accurately translated, again, gives you the protection you deserve. It protects your reputation. It can't just be about translating words on a page. It has to be about working with people to protect their status and protect their reputations. That's what we do. Now, we've talked about the importance of the human element in translation. That same human intelligence needs to guide technical solutions too. The amount of data that's live on the internet today is estimated at 9 zettabytes. By 2020, that figure is expected to be 45 zettabytes. What is a zettabyte? That's a zettabyte. It's basically a lot of bytes. I'm going to call that a gazillion bytes. I think that's a real number. The cloud is expected to play a major part in the transfer and the storage of this data. I'm sure, again, if it hasn't happened for you already, then at some point in your careers, cloud data transfer and cloud data storage is something that you're going to look at, perhaps you're going to rely on. Does anyone here have experience of cloud data transfer in any aspects of their jobs? Yeah? How secure would you say your data is in the cloud? Yeah. I think that sums it up very well. That sums it up better than words. Now, last year, one of our key legal clients told us it wasn't secure enough. This is a firm that has offices in 25 countries. They said to us, we need to do better. We need to do better than that. And we agreed with them, and we did something about it. We developed something called Secure Translator. We developed a range of secure file solutions. We now have a highly encrypted solution. We have protocols in place which mean that basically you can't make any unauthorized copies of data. You can't make any unauthorized extractions of data. The bottom line is it's watertight. Our clients told us they needed something better, and we agreed with them, so we found it. A little later, David's going to go into a little more detail on how your security needs can be met. But the key is we react to what people say they need. If people tell us security is a priority, our response is, great, you should not have to compromise. You do not have to compromise. 5 years from now, there will be 45 zettabytes of data online. It's a lot of bytes. It's 45 gazillion bytes. Your share of that needs to be secure. When it is, your reputation will be too. We'd like to share a few thoughts now on the importance of translation service in global mergers and acquisitions. Again, anyone here been involved in translation work or any other kind of work for a merger or an acquisition? Jolly good. May I ask, which countries were you working with? Japan, okay, jolly good. It's interesting. Japan's a good example. Translation is so important. You found it already. David and I find it every day. Cross-border mergers and acquisitions require painstaking attention to detail. That attention has to be paid sometimes under very severe time pressure. Financial documents have to be assimilated quickly. They'll form the basis of plans. They'll form the basis of negotiations. Every minute you lose carries a risk, and it carries a penalty. So, do you muddle through with non-specialist support? Do you run the risk of delays and inaccuracies that could collapse the deal? No, you don't. You do what Gwen does. You do what David and I do. You give prospective buyers and sellers a clear business advantage. You help them develop working relationships, because in the end, that's what it's about, developing working relationships. Not just translating financial documents, but translating important one-to-one communications. You enhance the process, you enable these relationships, because in the end, that's how deals are made. Whether it's a deal that's made shaking hands today, or whether it's a deal that's made in a merger and acquisition across different time zones, different continents, different languages. You enable the relationship. Now, prospective buyers and sellers are invested in clear communication. Buyers need a crystal clear understanding of the assets that are in play. They need a crystal clear understanding of the documents pertaining to those assets. Sellers need to reach out as widely as possible, sometimes in completely unfamiliar territory. They need to pay attention to due diligence. They need reduction of liability risks. They need swift, well-informed decision-making. Cross-border mergers and acquisitions can stand or fall on the quality of translation. Now, if prospective buyers start conducting due diligence without reaching out to a language service partner, then everything can simply grind to a halt when they find they can't understand the content and the nuance of important documents. We state that with confidence. The reason we state it with confidence is that when it happens, we're the people they come to. They come to us to fix it. As well as speed and precision, there are things that you can do to gain control of a process. Those of you who've been involved in the translation industry will know about this. Anyone have experience of developing specific glossaries for a client or for an industry? No? Totally good. I'm sure many of you communicate with colleagues in a kind of shorthand that comes from industry experience. We all do it. Each industry and each business within it has this shorthand. By creating a multilingual glossary that standardizes key terms, what you do is eliminate multiple meanings. You shut down ambiguity. You guarantee consistency, and yes, you save time and money. I've heard people say that every job is a sales job. To an extent, I agree with that, because every job involves the use of people skills. It involves the development of relationship, which is something we've talked about already. I also agree when people say that we're all in the people business. By outsourcing language requirements, you take an inappropriate burden away from your own staff. You delegate to specialists who develop skills that are useful to you every day. We're all in the people business. Choosing the right people to support you, whatever your business goals, is a very smart move. If you'd like to meet our people, obviously David and I are here today. Our stand is right next door. We're here all day today, we're here all day tomorrow. If you have any queries about any aspect of what we do, we'd be delighted to answer them right next door. The 9 lives of international trade. I don't know if we have any cat lovers in the audience. We believe there are 9 key considerations that people have to make when they're looking to expand overseas. It applies to law firms, it applies to their clients, it applies to anyone who's looking to reach out and speak to the world. We're not going to run through all 9 of them. They include things such as credit risk, documentation risk, quality risk. Even if a company is completely quality driven from top to bottom, when they reach out to a new market, they might find there are new stipulations in that market that they hadn't previously considered. There are new boxes to tick. That's one of the 9 lives. If anyone would like to discuss the key points, David and I have a report on this we'd be delighted to share with you. Pop next door, give us your details, and we'll send you a copy of it. But what we will do right now is talk about the 9th point. It's an important point, and it's one that David and I deal with every day. It's localization and cultural risk. Are you living with localization and cultural risk? Are you paying attention to it? Are you communicating with your target clients, your target partners, in a language they understand? Are you paying attention to language detail and cultural detail that will open doors? If you're not, then all your hard work could go to waste. Is your website localized? Not just translated, but localized. Will your brand values, your culture, your key selling points be as clear to your target audience as they are to your existing domestic partners? If they're not, then you can fail. Good businesses with good products and services can fail. We don't like to see it. We don't like to see anyone fail, but there's nothing worse than seeing a business that has good products, good services, everything is there set up to succeed, but they don't succeed because they don't communicate in the right way. I'm sure the translators here will have experienced this. A conversation between a parent and child in one language may be seen as charming, but in a different culture, it may be seen as shockingly disrespectful. That's what happens when you move between cultures. You need to be aware of this. We ran a project recently for translation of information for toys. These were cute British-made toys, and the toys had individual names. We localized for Germany. What we found was we had to completely change the names, because a name in English that may be charming and appeal to children, maybe not very charming at all in German. There are names, there are connotations, there are nuances. If you pay attention to this detail, then you'll succeed. A good language service partner will help you do that. I've mentioned the phrase "speak to the world." It's a favorite phrase of ours because we think we can help you do it. At the turn of the 21st century, if you wanted to speak to the world, you had a pretty good shot at doing it in English. That's no longer the case. Would anyone like to take a guess how many internet users there are in the world today? No? There are 3 billion. There are 3 billion today, and that number's only going to rise. If you communicate in English only, you will reach approximately a quarter of them. English is still a dominant business language, but it's not as dominant as it was 15 years ago, or 20 years ago, or even 5 years ago. If you want to reach 90% of that global audience, you need to use 13 languages. I won't bore you with the list of the languages. Again, if you want to know more about the languages you need to work with to speak to the world, we're next door all day today, we're next door all day tomorrow. You need to reach out, you need to be multilingual. That gives you an idea of the diversity we're talking about now. Where does the power lie? That's Beijing. Let's take China as an example of an economy that offers opportunities. Now, the economic rise of China is one of the most familiar stories of the 21st century. We've all heard a version of it. There's one statistic I particularly like. The urban middle class in China now outnumbers the entire population of the United States by a factor of 3 to 2. There are almost 500 million people in the urban middle class in China. These people are aspirational. They're well informed, they have disposable income. It's a huge, huge opportunity. Many of our clients know the opportunities in emerging markets. Many of them know the pitfalls. Many of them also recognize that the ground can very quickly shift beneath your feet. You need to be aware of changes. You need to be ready to react to them. Overseas companies that move into emerging markets and don't tick the boxes can expect no legal mercy. We've come across companies that set up shop in emerging markets without even establishing a recognized legal identity. If you do that, you are literally nobody. So the question many people ask us is, how do you recreate a brand identity in an emerging market? Again, taking China as an example, the latest figures we have for internet penetration in China are something approaching 50%. Again, that figure is rising. as the rate continues to rise, the question of how to engage with these target clients will only become more important. Now, the one thing we can tell you for sure is that you won't be engaging with them by them doing a Google search. Google is blocked in China, so it's domestic search engines that people use. It's domestic search engines that dominate that market. Anyone know which is the biggest? It's Baidu. Baidu has approximately a 60% share of search in China. It's extraordinarily powerful. What's interesting to us and what's interesting to our clients is that the way to get yourself noticed in domestic search engines overseas is often very different than what you do in the UK. There are boxes to tick, and many of them simply do not correspond in any way with what you call best practice on Google. You have to know your selling points. You have to put them on your home page, because with China's domestic search engines, far more weight is given to what appears on a home page than what you would find in the UK. You have to know your audience, because typically Chinese searchers will look down a whole page of options. That's not what I do. I don't know what you guys do. If I run a Google search, then I'll probably look at the first answer that comes up, maybe the second. A Chinese searcher will typically look right down the page. You have to know your product options, because if you, as a company, use own brand products for Chinese search engines, then it massively increases your chances of a search being picked up. And you have to know your content priorities. I'm sure many of you know who actually contribute to information on websites. Google prioritizes long-form original content. That is not what happens in many other countries. In China, what's prioritized on websites is short, snappy content, and it doesn't have to be original. If you frequently change the content on your website for the Chinese market, even if it's not original, as long as it's the first time it's been on your website, that's going to score you far more points than original long-form content. This isn't rocket science, but if people don't know, they don't follow the rules, and again, good products can fail to reach this market. And I'm sure anyone who's dealt with, we've talked about Japan or China or South Korea or any emerging market will know. If you can make your mark there, it can completely transform your business. I've said it before, I make no apology for repeating myself. It can't just be about repeating words on a page and translating words on a page. It has to be about working with people, figuring out what their priorities are, and finding a way to help them build a brand in these emerging markets. Those of us who were born in the 1960s and the 1970s, we started our working lives in an old century. Unfortunately for David, I'm including him in that. This is a new century. The 21st century is young. It's still developing. It's exciting. People who reach out, who speak to the world and do it in the right language, in the right tone, in the right way, it can be very, very exciting indeed for them. What happens when the rules change? Last week, the Chinese government made an interesting announcement. They assembled a team of experts on international law to tackle territorial disputes with their neighbors. Now, it included a quote from this chap. His name is Wu Shikun. He's the president of the Institute for the South China Seas. He is not a glamorous figure. He doesn't get quoted very often. But this quote struck a chord with us. China wants to maintain its interests using the existing international rules. But if these rules cannot function, then China may seek to change the rules. Now that's power. If China doesn't like the rules, then China will change the rules. What do you do about that? Because it applies to territorial disputes, it applies to mergers and acquisitions. It also applies to any kind of corporate compliance. And if you want to see the proof of that, ask GlaxoSmithKline. 8 months ago, GlaxoSmithKline were fined $489 million for being non-compliant with Chinese law. They were found guilty of bribing Chinese doctors to use their products. The interesting thing about that is, apart from the fact that it's almost $500 million, is that the trial took place over one day. It took place behind closed doors. There was no appeal. There was no argument. There was no legal mercy. If you get it wrong with these countries, if you get it wrong with these emerging markets, you pay the price. If you get it right, my goodness, the rewards are there. The rising economic powers of the 21st century are too big to ignore. In many cases, they're too big to argue with. So what do? You play by the rules. You keep playing by the rules. However frequently or inconveniently the rules change, if you partner with people who can help you keep up, who can keep abreast of current events, can help you comply and play by the rules and speak to people in a language they understand, then you can win. You can win for yourselves, you can win for the people you work with, you can win for your partners at home and overseas. And now David's going to tell you a little about how you can play by those rules.
Thanks, David. David's given a good overview there of some of the challenges that our clients can face and the rewards if they get it right. What I'd like to do is just to give you now some pointers as to how you can go about avoiding those challenges. Before we do that, let's kind of have a look at the game that we play to help you navigate the translation industry. This is from the Common Sense Advisory Stats, the largest independent advisory board in the translation industry. And they say there are some 26,000 language service providers covering 150 countries. It's a $35 billion industry, and it's almost recession-proof, and it still continues to grow at an alarming rate, 12% year-on-year growth. From the top 100 language service providers, the revenue ranges from in the region of $450 million for some of the larger US government providers, down to about $4 million for the 100th largest company. So it just gives you a sense of the level of fragmentation in the industry. If you're looking to reach out for new providers, you have to tread very carefully. Our industry is no different to a lot of other service industries, that there tends to be three kind of key dominant buying factors for our clients. Cost, speed and quality, and there's often said that you can choose two of these, but you can't always have all three. When we're speaking about translation specifically in the legal context, it introduces a fourth, and that fourth one being security. So if on the rationale of you can choose two from three in the legal space, do you have to compromise and only choose two from four? It's the status quo really, then maybe you do, but technology is playing a big part, and technology is shifting the curve when you're reaching out to your translation providers. There doesn't have to be a compromise. Technology enables us to not compromise on any of these areas. And I'll give you some pointers and some inside tips as to the things that you should be asking, things that you should be considering when you're reaching out to potential international partners. The first one is cost. Often translation is looked as a commoditized service. Cost can be a big factor for some people. And rightly so, everybody's working under budget constraints. One of the key factors that can help you to maintain and reduce your costs and to get better value is to ask your potential vendors around their translation management systems. The technology, as I say, is really moving the curve, and the advancements in the translation management systems can show you a lot of benefits, cost being one. Specifically, one of the key areas that you can look to reduce your costs, your translation costs, is by exploring with your potential vendors around their use of translation memories. Anybody familiar with translation memories? Not so much. Okay, I'll give you a quick overview on it. Translation memory essentially is an asset that you build The more you translate, so the content you translate is then stored in a memory. When you come to translating the same content again, you don't necessarily pay full price to translate the same content again. So people that aren't using these advanced translation management systems, you're going to be paying full price based on total word counts. So as over time, you build the bigger assets, your unit costs come down. So it pays to be loyal to your translation partner when you're building these assets. Often the point of comparison for price in our industry is price per 1,000 words. A lot of people will look at that, but it's always prudent to share your documents with your translation partners because different people will actually charge you on a different word count. So the price per word may be lower, but you may end up paying for more words, hence the bottom line is more. Always, wherever possible, and we know it's not always possible in the legal space, try and provide your partners with editable documents. Often we receive PDFs, images, and by design they're not designed to be editable document formats. But if wherever possible you can provide editable file formats, these are then able to be uploaded into the advanced translation management system. So that gives you helps to reduce your unit costs. Also, it's worth exploring who owns these assets. If for whatever reason you fall out in the relationship with your chosen providers and you want to move on, do you have to start again? Do you have to start to rebuild this asset that you've accumulated over the time? Well-established and transparent agencies will let you transfer your translation management assets. There are standard document file formats that you can export from their content management systems to take with you to your future providers. So it's always worth exploring with vendors their policies around the actual IP and the assets that are built over time. Exploring quality. Some of the questions. Quality is everybody wants good quality, right? How do you measure translation quality is $1 million question. But some of the things that you can do to ensure that you're receiving quality from your partners is just to explore their actual translators, their actual resources. Are the translators that are going to be used on your particular projects, are they native to your target language? A lot of the smaller fragmented partners will use clients or translators that are not native to ensure that we're keeping on tone with the things that David said. Then native translators is a must. Have a good awareness around the service levels that you're actually paying for. Often the processes for translation is translation, a second stage proofread, and then most reputable providers will provide an actual in-house quality assurance check. Some providers will bundle up the translation and the QA to give the perception that you're actually having it proofread. If you're not actually paying for proofreading, just be aware of that as to what's actually involved in the quality assurance processes that you guys are going through. Also ask questions around the actual experience, the qualifications of the people that are going to be working on your projects. Are they qualified translators? Some people will just use bilingual people. Some people will hand your legal documents to people that aren't committed to the sort of niche of legal translation, so it's well worth asking the questions around that. If and where possible, where David explained around the style guides and glossaries, if you're able to provide style guides and glossaries around some of your key terms, that can only help to improve the quality of your translations and the consistency going forward, because in the advanced translation management systems you upload the glossaries and they're automatically populated for the translators to recognise that this is an approved term. Time is a key factor for all of us, and we all have busy working lives, and giving feedback to your translation vendors is a must if you're looking to improve quality. If you're not seeking to actively feedback because of the translation memories that you're building, any mistakes or stylistic preferences that are included in the work that's delivered to you are going to just be repeated in future translation. So it's well worth taking the time out to give feedback from your clients, or your internal reviewers. And if you're looking to assess a vendor, we advise to steer clear of test translations. Some people can see it as a good gauge of the quality of the work that's going to be provided to you. However, a lot of language service providers will throw undue resources at a test translation, maybe introduce second, third, fourth stage proofreading to ensure that they're giving themselves the best chance of winning your business. However, it's just one of the aspects. It's not a given that you're going to then have those same resources and that level of depth and attention in the future work. What we do and what we recommend that you do is ask to speak to other established clients of your language service providers. It's much more powerful for a kind of third-party validation of the work that you've delivered for them over multiple languages over a sustained period of time. So the test translation track can be a little bit misleading if you go down that route. Speed is another area that is another dominant buying motive when you're looking at fast turnarounds. If it's important to you, ask your potential vendors about their coverage. Do they have global coverage offices that can, once the translations have finished, chase the time zones and do the QAs in other areas, in other regions, so that things are ready for you 9 o'clock in the morning, or probably 8 o'clock in the morning for a lot of you guys. So the global coverage can really help to reduce the turnaround time for translation projects. Also, another factor in terms of the speed is, are you looking at reaching out to a multi-language vendor like us, vendors that cover a huge range of languages, in excess of 150 for ourselves, there are also vendors that are single language vendors. They tend to specialise in one particular area. If you have the benefit of having multi-language vendors is that you're not spending as much time communicating with different agencies, placing your work and answering any questions. You tend to have one single point of contact, so it can reduce your own internal time as well. It's also good to have an understanding of the kind of productivity rates for translation projects, and we're very much aware that in this space that you don't tend to have a lot of visibility on the work that lands on in your inbox, but just have the understanding that a typical translator can translate in the region of 2,500 words a day as a benchmark. You can of course scale up for projects that need to be done in shorter time zones. A couple of weeks ago we delivered 40,000 words overnight for a client by ramping up the amount of translators that are working on the project. Does come with inconsistencies or risk of inconsistencies across the project, so you should be aware of that if you are looking for projects to be done in shorter turnaround times than the standard 2,500 words a day. But it can be done. Reputable vendors will have that scale to be able to scale up for you. Also, linking back to the translation memory systems, if you're using advanced TM systems and you're building these translation assets, this can help to reduce your turnaround times as well. Because translators aren't having to retranslate everything from scratch and are able to recycle some of the content, this can really help to reduce the time that it takes to complete the projects. Final one really is about security, and a non-secure workflow. It's good to ask questions about how your files are being managed. If you're using native translators, then it's likely to be the case that they're not based in the office or in the same country of the people that are going to be translating your work. How are your files being managed? Are you emailing them to your language service provider? Are they then emailing them out all around the world? How secure is email? The to and fro communication with any translator queries, this can leave you exposed in terms of security. So it's good questions to ask as to how are our files being managed, how secure are the systems that you're working with. A much more secure environment for translators is expanding what David said about the secure translator portal, is to have a on-premise secure portal that you can yourselves upload your files into. Your LSP's project managers can then facilitate the distribution of the files inside the same platform, and the translators, they log in with secure time-coded access. They're unable to share the documents easy. This particular system takes away even the print screen function, disables that when people are logging in. You can't copy and paste content in these kind of systems. As much as possible has been done to prevent the sharing of your content. Second to actually taking a photograph of a screen, it's as secure as it possibly can be in the translation environment. So if security is an issue, then do ask questions about how your files are being managed. That brings us on time to the end of our session. Our goal was to make sure that you each took away one thing that could be of value to you to help you move forward with international partners. I hope we've done that. If we haven't, then open to any questions now, or as David said, our stand is next door, so please do come and speak to us. But thanks for taking the time out and joining us, and have a good rest of the show. Thank you.